Before you judge me, please listen. Yes, I told my husband I wanted him to watch while my ex took over. Yes, I said those exact words. But I didn't mean I wanted to cheat. I wanted to trigger jealousy, spice things up, fix us. I didn't think he'd go silent. I didn't think he'd pull out his phone. I didn't think he'd show me a video of my own mother, betraying me. Look, I know how this sounds. I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking I'm some kind of monster, some terrible wife who doesn't deserve anything good. But that's not the whole story. That's not my story. And if you just listen, if you just try to understand where I was coming from, maybe you'll see that I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to save my marriage. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. We'd been married for 4 years. 4 years of the same routine, the same conversations, the same everything. Do you know what that's like? To feel invisible in your own home. To feel like you're just going through the motions, day after day, and nobody even notices you're there. That's what it felt like with him. He'd come home from work, sit on the couch, scroll through his phone, eat dinner, watch TV, and go to bed. Every single day. The same thing. I tried everything to get his attention. I bought new lingerie. I cooked his favorite meals. I suggested date nights, weekend trips, anything to break the monotony. He'd nod, say, "Yeah, sounds good." And then nothing would change. It was like talking to a wall that occasionally grunted in agreement, but never actually moved. And yes, I'll admit it, I started thinking about my ex. Not because I wanted to be with him, but because I remembered how he used to look at me. Like I was the only person in the room. Like I mattered. Like I was exciting and desirable and worth paying attention to. My husband used to look at me like that too, in the beginning. But somewhere along the way, that look disappeared, and I became just another piece of furniture. So when we had that fight, when he accused me of always bringing up my ex, I was already frustrated. Already at my breaking point. We were arguing about intimacy again, about how he never initiated anything anymore, how he never seemed interested, how I felt rejected every single time I tried to connect with him physically or emotionally. "You always bring up your ex," he said, not even looking up from his phone. And something inside me just snapped. "Maybe you should watch him take over then," I said. "Maybe you'd learn something." I wanted him to react. I wanted him to get angry, to fight back, to show me that he still cared enough to be jealous. I wanted to see fire in his eyes again, even if it was angry fire. Anything was better than that dead, empty stare he'd been giving me for months. But he didn't react. Not the way I expected. He just went silent, completely silent. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, that makes the air feel thick and heavy. He looked at me for a long moment, and I couldn't read his expression at all. Then he stood up, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door. I stood there in the living room, my heart pounding, thinking maybe I'd finally gotten through to him. Maybe he was in there processing his feelings, getting angry, preparing to come back out and have a real conversation with me. Maybe this was the wake-up call he needed. I was wrong. For 3 days, he barely spoke to me. He'd answer in one-word responses if I asked him something directly, but otherwise it was like I didn't exist. And the weird thing was, his silence wasn't cold or angry. It was calm, methodical, like he was thinking about something very carefully, working out a problem in his head. I kept trying to explain. "It was just a joke," I'd say. "You know I didn't mean it literally. I was just trying to get your attention. I was frustrated." He'd nod. "I know." "So, are we okay?" "We're fine." But we weren't fine. I could feel it. There was something happening beneath the surface, something I couldn't see or understand. It made me nervous, anxious. I started apologizing, even though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. I brought him coffee in the morning. I suggested we talk about it. I tried to initiate physical intimacy, thinking maybe that would break through whatever wall he'd built. He was polite, distant, not cold, just elsewhere. On the third day, he came home from work early. I was in the kitchen making dinner, and I heard him come in. I turned around, ready to greet him with a smile, to try once again to make things normal between us. He was holding his phone. "Hey," I said tentatively, "you're home early." "Yeah," he said, "I need to show you something." My heart started racing. I don't know why, but something about his tone made me afraid. Not afraid that he'd hurt me physically, but afraid of what was coming. Afraid of the unknown. "What is it?" I asked, wiping my hands on a towel. He didn't answer. He just walked over to the kitchen table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Then he gestured to the chair across from him. I sat. He placed his phone on the table between us, screen facing me. Then he pressed play. The video was grainy, clearly recorded from across a cafe or restaurant. The angle suggested it was taken secretly, maybe from a phone propped up on a nearby table or held low, but the audio was clear, crystal clear, and I heard her voice, my mother's voice. "She still loves her ex. You should take her back. She'll leave her husband eventually." My entire body went cold. Ice flooded through my veins. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. My mother, my own mother, sitting across from my ex-boyfriend at a cafe, having coffee, talking about me. "What?" I started, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. "What is this?" My husband didn't answer. His eyes were locked on my face, watching my reaction with that same calm, methodical expression he'd been wearing for 3 days. On the video, my mother leaned forward, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "You were always better for her," she said earnestly. "She made a mistake. I tried to tell her at the time, but she wouldn't listen. She was so stubborn." My ex shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't know if I should—" "She talks about you all the time," my mother interrupted. "Constantly. Remember when we did this? Remember when he said that? She's not happy. I'm her mother. I know my daughter. She's not happy with him." I felt tears burning in my eyes. "Why is she saying this?" I asked, my voice breaking. I don't talk about him all the time. I don't—" "Keep watching," my husband said quietly. My ex rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncertain. "I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about her sometimes. We had something good, but she's married now. I don't want to cause problems." "She's already in problems," my mother said firmly. "That man she married, he's not right for her. He's too quiet, too boring. She needs someone with passion, someone like you. She needs excitement, adventure. She needs someone who understands her." I was shaking now. My hands trembled on the table. "I didn't know about this," I said desperately, looking at my husband. "I swear to you I had no idea she was doing this." He still didn't respond. His face was a mask. On the video, my ex asked, "So what are you saying I should do?" My mother smiled. Actually smiled. "Message her. Start casual. Just a, 'Hey, thinking about you' kind of thing. See how she responds. Trust me, she'll respond. And once that door is open, once you two start talking again, nature will take its course. She'll remember what she's missing. She'll remember what you had together." "And her husband?" My mother waved her hand dismissively. "He won't fight for her. He's not that type. He'll just let her go. And honestly, that's probably for the best. She deserves someone who makes her feel alive." The video ended. The silence in our kitchen was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator, my own ragged breathing. "How long?" my husband asked. "What?" "How long have you been in contact with him?" "I haven't," I practically shouted. "I swear I haven't talked to him in years." "I don't know why she's saying these things." "You don't talk about him?" "No, I mean, maybe occasionally, like if something reminds me of a funny story from back then, but not like she's making it sound." "You don't tell your mother you're unhappy with me." I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because the truth was, I had complained to my mother, multiple times, about how he never paid attention to me anymore, how our marriage felt stale, how I felt invisible. But I'd just been venting. That's what daughters do, right? They vent to their mothers about their problems. It didn't mean I wanted to leave him. It didn't mean I wanted my ex back. Did it? I've vented to her, I admitted quietly. But that's normal. That's what people do. It doesn't mean... He stood up. The chair scraped against the floor with a harsh sound that made me flinch. "Where are you going?" I asked. He walked to our bedroom without answering. I heard the closet door open. I heard drawers opening and closing. And then I heard the sound that made my blood run cold, the zipper of a suitcase. I jumped up and ran to the bedroom. He was pulling clothes out of the closet, folding them with mechanical precision, placing them in my suitcase. "What are you doing?" I demanded, even though it was obvious. "You can't just... This isn't fair. I didn't do anything wrong." He continued packing in silence. My dresses, my jeans, my shoes. "Will you please just talk to me?" I was crying now, full-on sobbing. "Please, just tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what I can do to fix this." He zipped up the suitcase. The sound was final, absolute. "This isn't my fault," I said desperately. "My mother did this. She went behind my back. She manipulated the situation. I didn't ask her to do any of this." He picked up the suitcase and carried it toward the door. I followed him, my mind racing, trying to find the right words, the magic sentence that would make him stop and listen and understand. "I love you," I said. "I love you, not him. Whatever my mother said, whatever she thinks, she's wrong. I chose you. I married you. That has to mean something." He set the suitcase down by the front door and finally looked at me. Really looked at me. And what I saw in his eyes wasn't anger or hurt or betrayal. It was something worse. It was nothing. Empty. Like he was looking at a stranger. "You wanted your ex to take over," he said quietly. "Go ahead. Your mother already arranged everything." "No," I whispered. "That's not what I wanted. That's not what I meant. You said you wanted to spice things up, to fix us, to make me learn something." He opened the door. "Congratulations, I learned plenty." He pushed the suitcase out into the hallway. I grabbed his arm. "Please, please don't do this. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can..." He gently removed my hand from his arm. "This is our home," I said weakly. "You can't just kick me out." "It's my home," he corrected. "My name on the lease. I've been paying the rent since we moved in. You wanted to focus on your art, remember? I supported that. I supported you." I had forgotten about that. How he'd insisted I didn't need to work, that I should pursue my passion for painting. How he'd taken on the financial burden so I could have the freedom to create. It had seemed romantic at the time. Now it felt like a trap. "But," I started, "you wanted to know what it's like when someone takes over." His voice was so calm, so measured. It was terrifying. "Now you get to find out what it's like when someone takes everything away." He stepped back into the apartment. I stood in the doorway, frozen, unable to believe this was actually happening. "You have until the end of the week to get your art supplies and any other personal items," he said. "I'll box them up and leave them in the hallway. Don't come back after that." "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, hating how small and pathetic my voice sounded. "Your mother's house seems like a good option," he said. "I'm sure she and your ex will help you get settled." And then he closed the door. I heard the lock click, then another lock, then the chain sliding into place. I stood there in the hallway staring at my suitcase, unable to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A message from my ex. "Hey, your mom said you might need someone to talk to. I'm here if you need me." I stared at the message. My mother had already told him. She'd already set this in motion. She'd probably sent him that message the moment she knew my husband was confronting me. I called her. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I scrolled through my recent messages with her. There were dozens from the past few months. Me complaining about my husband. Me saying I felt invisible. Me saying I missed feeling desired. Me mentioning, casually, how my ex used to make me feel. I had given her all the ammunition she needed. But I didn't mean it like that. I was just venting. Just expressing my frustrations to my mother, the way daughters do. I never said I wanted to leave my husband. I never said I wanted my ex back. Did I? I tried to remember the exact words I'd used. Had I said, "Sometimes I wish I'd stayed with him"? Had I said, "He knew how to make me feel special"? Had I said, "My husband will never be like him"? The memories were blurry, distorted by panic and tears. I sat down on the floor of the hallway, my back against the wall opposite my former apartment door. My apartment, my home. The place I'd lived for 3 years, where I'd painted in the spare bedroom, where I'd made dinner every night, where I'd fallen asleep next to my husband every night. Former husband? Was he my former husband now? Could he just end things like this, without warning, without a chance to explain? But what was there to explain? I'd told him to watch my ex take over. I'd said it specifically to hurt him, to make him jealous, to get a reaction. And then my mother had been secretly meeting with my ex, encouraging him to contact me, telling him I still loved him. How did it look from his perspective? It looked like I'd been planning this, like I'd been planting seeds with my mother, complaining about my marriage, reminiscing about my ex, setting up an exit strategy. And then I'd made that comment about watching my ex take over. As what? A test? A preview? A threat? Oh God, what had I done? I pulled my knees up to my chest and wrapped my arms around them. The hallway was cold and empty. A neighbor passed by, glanced at me sitting there with my suitcase, and quickly looked away, hurrying into their apartment. Nobody wanted to get involved in someone else's drama. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my ex. "Seriously, I'm worried about you. Your mom said things weren't good. You don't have to go through this alone." I wanted to throw my phone against the wall, but I didn't. Instead, I opened the message and stared at it. He was offering comfort, support, exactly what I'd been craving from my husband for months. And my mother had served it up on a silver platter, probably knowing that in my vulnerable state, I'd be tempted. Was that what she wanted? For me to fall into my ex's arms, to prove her right, to validate all the poison she'd been feeding him about me? Or had I actually given her the impression that's what I wanted? I scrolled back through my messages to her again, forcing myself to read them objectively. I'm so tired of being ignored. I miss feeling like someone actually wants me. Remember how ex's name used to surprise me with flowers? My husband hasn't done that in 2 years. I don't think he even notices me anymore. Reading them now, I could see how they could be interpreted as me wanting out, as me longing for my ex, as me being unhappy enough to leave. But that wasn't what I meant. I was just frustrated, venting, wanting someone to listen and sympathize. Wasn't I? I tried to remember what I'd felt when I said those things to my mother. Had there been a part of me that was testing the waters, that was considering whether my ex would take me back, that was wondering if I'd made a mistake marrying my husband? I didn't know anymore. I didn't trust my own memory, my own motivations, my own feelings. All I knew was that I was sitting in a hallway with a suitcase, locked out of my home, with my marriage in ruins, and my mother's betrayal crushing me from the inside. I finally stood up, grabbed my suitcase handle and started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I couldn't go to my mother's house. I couldn't face her. I couldn't stomach the idea of her smug satisfaction, her "I told you so," her attempts to push me toward my ex. I ended up at a cheap motel off the highway, the kind of place where they don't ask questions and accept cash. The room smelled like old cigarettes and industrial cleaner. The bedspread was stained. The TV only got basic cable, but it was mine for the night, at least. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. I should call a friend. I should call someone who could help me figure out what to do next. But who? Most of my friends had drifted away after I got married. I'd been so focused on trying to fix my relationship with my husband that I'd neglected other relationships. The few friends I still had regular contact with were mostly his friends too, or couple friends we'd made together. I could already imagine how that conversation would go. Hey, so I told my husband I wanted him to watch while my ex took over, and then he found out my mother has been secretly meeting with my ex and encouraging him to break up my marriage, and now I'm locked out of my apartment. Can I crash at your place? Yeah. That would go over well. I thought about calling my ex back, not because I wanted to be with him, but because he was literally the only person who had offered to help. And maybe he didn't know the full extent of what my mother had been doing. Maybe he'd been manipulated too. Or maybe he'd been a willing participant, eagerly waiting for his chance to get me back. I didn't call him. Instead, I lay back on the questionable motel bed and stared at the ceiling. Water-stained, cracked, with a weird brown discoloration in one corner that I tried not to think about too hard. This was my life now. This was what I'd reduced myself to with one careless sentence and months of careless venting to the wrong person. But I still didn't think I deserved this, did I? I'd been frustrated, lonely, feeling neglected in my marriage. Those were valid feelings, and I'd expressed them to my mother because that's what daughters do. That's normal. That's allowed. And yes, I'd said something hurtful to my husband in a moment of anger. But it was just words, just a frustrated, desperate attempt to get his attention. I didn't actually want my ex there. I didn't actually want to cheat. I just wanted my husband to care. Was that so wrong? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that this was an overreaction. Yes, what my mother did was horrible. Yes, the optics were bad. But my husband hadn't even given me a chance to explain. He'd just decided, unilaterally, that our marriage was over, that I was out, that I deserved to be punished. That wasn't fair. We could have worked through this. We could have gone to counseling, had real conversations about what was wrong in our marriage, figured out how to reconnect. Instead, he'd chosen the nuclear option. He'd thrown me out like garbage. And yeah, maybe I'd made a mistake by saying what I said. But his response was worse. You don't just end a 4-year marriage over one sentence. You don't lock your wife out in the hallway like she's nothing. I felt anger building in my chest, replacing the fear and sadness. This wasn't all my fault. He bore responsibility too. He'd been emotionally absent for months. He'd ignored my attempts to connect. He'd made me feel invisible in my own home. If he'd just paid attention to me, if he'd just made me feel wanted and loved, I never would have been frustrated enough to say something like that. In a way, he'd driven me to it. And now he was playing the victim, acting like I was this terrible person who'd betrayed him, when really, I was the one who'd been neglected and dismissed and pushed to my breaking point. My phone buzzed. Another message from my ex. Hey, I know this is weird, but your mum gave me your location. I'm nearby. Do you want me to come talk? You shouldn't be alone right now. My mother gave him my location. How did she even know where I was? I checked my phone settings, location sharing, still on with my family. She could see exactly where I was. She'd probably been tracking me since I left the apartment. She knew I was at a motel, and she'd immediately told my ex. She was stage managing this entire thing, pushing us together, trying to force the outcome she wanted. I wanted to scream, but I also wanted someone to talk to. Someone who would listen and sympathize and tell me I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't a terrible person, that I deserved better than this, and my ex was offering exactly that. This was how it happened, I realized. This was how affairs started. Not because people were evil or immoral, but because they were vulnerable and hurt and desperate for someone to make them feel better. And someone was there, offering comfort, offering validation, offering everything they'd been missing. I understood in that moment how people justified cheating to themselves, How they convinced themselves it was okay, that they deserved it, that their partner had driven them to it. I understood my mother's logic now too. From her perspective, I was trapped in an unhappy marriage with a man who didn't appreciate me. She'd found someone who did appreciate me, someone from my past who'd proven he could make me happy. She was just trying to help, to save me from a life of misery. She was wrong, but she thought she was right. She thought she was being a good mother. And my husband, from his perspective, had a wife who constantly complained about him, reminisced about her ex, and then openly said she wanted her ex to take over. When he discovered my mother was secretly plotting to break up our marriage, it confirmed all his worst fears. It proved, in his mind, that I'd been planning to leave all along. He was wrong too, but he thought he was right. He thought he was protecting himself from further hurt. And me? I'd been frustrated and neglected, and I'd lashed out in a moment of anger, not realizing how that moment would be interpreted, how it would connect to all the other moments, how it would paint a picture I never intended to paint. I'd been careless, thoughtless. I hadn't considered how my words and actions looked from the outside. But did that mean I deserved to lose everything? Did that mean I deserved to be sitting in a dirty motel room with no home, no husband, and no clear path forward? I didn't know anymore. I texted my ex back, "Thank you, but I need to be alone right now. I appreciate the offer." He responded immediately, "Okay, I understand. I'm here if you need me. Anytime." I turned off location sharing with my family. Then I blocked my mother's number. I couldn't talk to her right now. Maybe not ever. I tried calling my husband one more time. It rang once, then went to voicemail. He'd declined the call. I left a message. "I know you don't want to talk to me. I know you're angry. But please give me a chance to explain. Please let me come home so we can talk about this like adults. We can fix this. I know we can. Please." He didn't call back. I lay in that motel room for 3 days. I ordered food delivery. I watched terrible TV. I cried. I slept. I cried some more. I went through every possible scenario in my head, trying to figure out how to fix this, how to make him understand, how to salvage my marriage. On the 4th day, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is husband's name. I'm using a friend's phone since you keep calling from different numbers. Your things are packed and in the building storage room. The super has the key. Please collect them within 48 hours or they'll be disposed of. Do not attempt to contact me again. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce." Divorce. The word hit me like a physical blow. He was really doing this. He was really ending our marriage. Not because I'd actually cheated, not because I'd actually done anything with my ex, but because of one sentence and some unfortunate context. That was it. 4 years of marriage, gone. Just like that. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to blame him for being unreasonable, for overreacting, for not giving me a chance. But underneath the anger was something else. Something I didn't want to look at too closely. Doubt. What if I had wanted my ex back? On some level. What if my venting to my mother had been something more? What if I'd been emotionally cheating without realizing it, living in the past, comparing my husband unfavorably to my ex, setting up the failure of my marriage? What if I'd been the toxic one all along? I collected my things from the storage room. 3 boxes of art supplies, 2 boxes of clothes and personal items, and a bag with my toiletries and makeup. That was it. That was all I had to show for 4 years of marriage and 7 years of relationship before that. I loaded everything into my car, at least that was still mine, and sat in the driver's seat, unsure where to go. I couldn't afford an apartment on my own. I had no job, no income. I'd been depending on my husband financially while I pursued my art, which was really just a nice way of saying I'd been painting occasionally, and otherwise enjoying not having to work. I'd have to get a job, find a cheap room to rent somewhere, start over from scratch at 32 years old, or I could call my ex. I could let my mother's plan play out. I could slide back into an old, comfortable relationship with someone who knew me, who wanted me, who was ready and willing to take me in. It would be so easy. I sat there in my car for a long time, phone in hand, my ex's contact information pulled up on the screen. All I had to do was press call. All I had to do was say yes. All I had to do was prove everyone right, my mother, my husband, maybe even myself. In the end, I didn't call. Not because I was strong or noble, or because I'd had some great revelation about my behavior. I didn't call because I realized something. I didn't want my ex. I didn't want my husband either, at least not the version of him I'd been living with for the past year. What I wanted was to feel important, to feel seen, to feel like I mattered, and I'd been trying to get that feeling from someone else. First my husband, then potentially my ex, instead of finding it in myself. That didn't excuse what I'd done. It didn't make my behavior okay. It didn't mean I hadn't hurt people or made terrible choices, but it meant I could move forward differently. I drove to the cheapest extended stay motel I could find, paid for a month in advance with the credit card that still had my husband's name on it. Petty maybe, but I figured he owed me that much, and started looking for a job. Any job. I couldn't afford to be picky. I also started therapy. I found a sliding scale clinic that charged based on income, which in my case was 0. In therapy, I talked about everything. The fight, my mother's betrayal, my husband's reaction, my own behavior leading up to it all. My therapist didn't tell me I was right or wrong. She just asked questions. What were you hoping would happen when you said that to your husband? What need were you trying to meet? How do you think your words made him feel? What role did you play in the deterioration of your marriage? That last question stung, because I wanted to say, no role at all. It was all him, he ignored me, he made me feel invisible. But that wasn't entirely true. I'd been passive. I'd waited for him to notice I was unhappy instead of directly telling him. I'd hinted and sulked and complained to my mother instead of having honest conversations with my husband. I'd let resentment build up until it exploded in the cruelest way possible. And yes, he bore responsibility too. He should have paid more attention. He should have noticed I was unhappy. He should have tried harder. But I couldn't control his behavior. I could only control mine, and mine had been pretty terrible. 6 months later, I was working as a waitress at a diner, living in a tiny studio apartment, and still in therapy. The divorce was finalized. My ex had stopped messaging me after I told him firmly that I needed to be alone. My mother and I weren't speaking. I was lonely, broke, starting over from nothing. But I wasn't sitting around waiting for someone else to make me feel important anymore. I started painting again, really painting, not just dabbling when I felt inspired. I joined a local art group. I made new friends who didn't know anything about my failed marriage or my toxic behavior. And slowly, painfully, I started to understand something. I had been toxic, I had been selfish, I had been wrong. Not because I wanted my ex back, not because I'd cheated, but because I'd played games instead of communicating. Because I'd tried to manipulate my husband's emotions instead of honestly expressing my needs. Because I'd justified my own bad behavior by focusing on his shortcomings. Because I'd refused to take responsibility for my part in our problems until it was too late. I don't know if I deserved what happened. That's not really the right question. The right question is, what did I learn? What will I do differently next time? Next time, if there is a next time, I'll use my words before I use my weapons. I'll communicate directly instead of dropping hints and hoping someone figures it out. I'll take responsibility for my own happiness instead of making someone else responsible for it. And I'll think very carefully before I say something designed to hurt, because words have consequences. Actions have consequences. And sometimes those consequences are permanent. My mother calls sometimes. I don't answer. She leaves voicemails saying she was just trying to help, that she only wanted what was best for me, that I'm being ungrateful and cruel by shutting her out. Maybe I am cruel. Maybe I'm still being toxic, in a different way, by refusing to forgive her. Or maybe I'm just protecting myself from someone who hurt me, even if she thought she was helping. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. What I do know is this. I said something terrible to my husband. My mother did something terrible to both of us. And he did something terrible back. We all played our parts in destroying something that might have been fixable if any one of us had chosen differently. And now, we all have to live with the consequences. Me most of all. Because I'm the one who started it, with one careless, cruel sentence I thought would fix everything. Instead, it broke everything that mattered. And I can say it wasn't fair, that he overreacted, that my mother manipulated the situation, that I deserved a chance to explain. But at the end of the day, I'm still sitting here alone, and he's still living in our apartment without me, and my ex is still out there somewhere thinking I might change my mind. And it all started with me, with my words, my choices, my refusal to take responsibility until it was too late. So before you judge me, and I know you will, because I judge myself every day, just remember, toxic behavior doesn't always look like screaming and throwing things. Sometimes it looks like playing games and manipulating emotions and saying things specifically designed to hurt. Sometimes the person who thinks they're the victim is actually the villain. Sometimes that person is me. And the hardest part isn't accepting that I was wrong. The hardest part is accepting that even though I was wrong, even though I learned my lesson, even though I changed and grew and became better, it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't bring him back. It doesn't undo the damage. It just means I get to carry this knowledge forward into whatever comes next, hoping I'll do better, knowing that this time there's no one to blame but myself. That's my story. That's my truth. And if you think I'm a terrible person, well, you're probably right. But I'm trying to be less terrible. And maybe that's all any of us can do.